we take this opportunity now to begin to bring ourselves into this spiritual community of those who are gathering in this room and those who are gathering online, as we sing ourselves into community and focus our time with one another as we open ourselves to the gift of being here. Welcome as we gather, an affirming and inclusive community that gathers in so many different ways. We gather in person, we gather online, we gather to work together, to learn together, to eat together, to play together, to heal life's hurts together, and support society's most vulnerable individuals with one another. We gather in gratitude and deep respect for this land, Treaty 6 territory, a traditional meeting ground, traveling route of Cree, Saulteaux, Blackfoot, Dene, Métis, Nakota Sioux, a place that has become home to so many of us who have come recently or generations ago to call this land our home. And we gather with each other together in this space and on the internet to inspire each other to hold fast to love and integrity, to hold fast to each other in helping to create a more fair and just world, to hold fast to each other in healing the wounds of our history, working for better relationships with each other, a healthier planet, and striving for a higher humanity. So whoever we are, whatever our shape, our size, our age, our gender identity, our sexual orientation, our race, our ethnic identity, our cultural identity, our language, we bring our light to one another. And we light a candle, as we do each time we gather, to focus our thoughts, to center our hearts and our minds in a search for that which is true, for that which is just, for that which is kind, for that which is wise. We come seeking comfort, seeking wisdom, seeking community. And so we sing ourselves into community with one another.
Each
I want to share a story for the child in all of us, whether we're big or small, tall or not so much. This is a time for us to listen for the wisdom of story, the wisdom we hear in children's literature. And today I want to share a story by Douglas Wood called Granddad's Prayers of the Earth. There's some beautiful artwork that's been illustrated by P.J. Lynch. When I was little, my granddad was my best friend. Being with him always made the world feel just right. Granddad and I liked to go for walks in the woods. We didn't walk very far or very fast or very straight. And while we walked, I would ask him questions I wasn't sure about, things I wondered about. I'd say things like, "Why is it, Granddad?" Or I'd ask, "What if?" Or, "Does it ever?" And one day, I asked Granddad about prayers. For a long time, he was quiet. He didn't say anything until we came to the tallest trees in the forest. And then he answered with a question. "Did you know," he whispered, "that trees pray?" I listened closely, but I couldn't hear them. "See how they reach for the sky," he said. "They reach and reach for clouds and sun and moon and stars. And what else is reaching but a prayer?" I thought about the trees and I kept listening for them, and while I thought, I sat on an old mossy rock. "Rocks pray too," he said. "Pebbles and boulders and old weathered hills. They're still and silent. And those are important ways to pray." I thought hard about the rocks. I picked up a pebble and I stuck it in my pocket. And when we walked a little while further and came to a small stream, the water splashed and sparkled and tiny fish hovered in the shadows. And so I asked Granddad, "Do streams pray too?" And he said they do. And lakes and rivers and waters of all kinds. Sometimes they pray silently, like the rocks. They lie still and calm, reflecting clouds or birds or sunsets or an evening star. And sometimes they pray with movement, flowing across the face of the earth, giving themselves to the ocean, giving themselves to the sky, and then beginning their journey all over again. Sometimes waters pray with laughter, chuckling to their friends. Sometimes they pray by dancing, leaping into the air and falling back down again. There are so many ways to pray. Even more, Granddad said. The tall grass prays as it waves its arms beneath the sky, and flowers pray as they breathe their sweetness into the air. And the winds pray as they whisper or moan or sigh. It's saying a prayer and singing a hymn at the same time. A bird prays when it sings the first song of the morning. And it prays in that silent moment just before it sings. And the robin's last song at sundown, that's a prayer. All the beings of the world pray, my granddad said. They pray as they slip through the forest or sparkle in the water, as they climb mountainsides or soar into clouds or burrow into the earth. Every living thing gives its life to the beauty of all life. And that gift is a prayer. Then we were quiet, my granddad and I. He was watching something far away, and I was thinking about everything he'd said about the rocks and the trees and the grass and the birds and the flowers. And finally I asked him to tell me about the prayers of people. Granddad smiled and he ruffled my hair and he said, "People pray some of the most wonderful prayers of all. Bending down to smell a flower, that's a prayer. Quietly watching the sunrise, feeling the slow turning of the earth and saying hello to a new day, that's one of the oldest prayers. Standing in snowy woods on a winter day and watching your breath become part of the breath of the world, that's a way to pray. Making music or painting a picture, that's a prayer. Holding hands around the table with family and friends, remembering everything that holds us together and giving thanks, that's one of the greatest prayers. Sometimes, Granddad said, people pray when they're sick or sad or lonely or they have a problem that feels too big to carry by themselves. They might say words that they learned from their fathers or mothers or granddads or great-grandmas. But often they find their own words, their important thing to remember. That's the word which will always be right if we're real and true and our words come from our heart. We'd walked far enough and Granddad said it was time to go back, but I had one last question. Are our prayers answered, Granddad? He smiled and he said, most prayers aren't really questions to be answered. And if we listen really closely, a prayer is often its own answer. Like the trees and the wind and the waters, we pray because we're here. Not to change the world, but to change ourselves. Because it's when we change ourselves that we change the world. There are so many ways to pray. Whenever we admire something beautiful. Whenever we whisper in the woods because it's just so quiet. Whenever we name our hopes or our fears to each other or out loud or to ourselves. Whenever we say thank you. All the ways we love life. That's our prayer. That's our way to pray with the earth. Our Kids Spirit program is taking a little break for the summer, but we've got activity table over on the side here to my right and your left that kids are welcome to take part there anytime or to stay with us here in the circle. And Kids Spirit and Youth Cafe will return in the fall. I want to share some words with you this morning that come from Kathleen Dean Moore. She's a professor of philosophy at Oregon State University, and she's written a book called Hold Fast. And if you're like me, and you don't know what a holdfast is and have to look it up or Google it, this is what it is. It's that root-like structure of algae or other simple plants. That's the way they attach to the substrate. And this is from the prologue of her book, Holdfast. In the green light-shot sea along the Oregon coast, kelp lean toward land on incoming tides and swirl seaward as the water falls away, never letting go of their grip on the ocean floor. And what keeps each plant in place is a holdfast. A fist of knobby fingers that stick to rock with a glue the plant makes from sunshine and salt water, an invisible bond, strong enough to hold against all but the worst winter gales. That holdfast is a structure biologists don't really understand. Philosophers haven't even begun to try to understand it. In blue halogen-lit places of constant movement, so many of us live in times of separation. The comings and goings, airport embraces, the x-ray rooms, loneliness, notes left by the phone, children grow tall, then restless, grandparents grow wise, and then forget their children's names. My work takes me from place to place: Ohio, Oregon, Minnesota, Alaska, Arizona, British Columbia, Oregon again. Everywhere I go, I pass people who've come from someplace else. We've all left much behind. Sunday dinners, front porches, small certainties, knowledge of when to plant tomatoes and where to buy string and what to do when someone dies. Secret places of safety and meaning. We professors who should be studying connection study distinctions instead. In White Laboratory, biologists find it easy to forget that they are natural philosophers. Sitting on a boulder, whitewashed by western gulls, watching the sliding surf, I resolve to study holdfasts. What we cling to in the confusion of the tides. What structures of connection hold us in place? How will we find an attachment that makes us feel safe and fully alive? Every now and then, a student in my philosophy class will raise the question. Clearly embarrassed to ask what seems like a parody of all questions, they plunge anyway. What's all this for? What does it signify? What is the meaning of life? It's usually an easy enough question to evade. Professors get pretty glib. There are lots of gambits, and these days philosophy is mostly about language anyway, and you can usually turn the question back on the student or tell him that if he has to ask, he probably won't be satisfied with the answer. And then the words trail off, and the students shift in their seats, impatient to move back to material that will be on the test. But last week, a student who had studied metaphysics and epistemology and Kierkegaard, a student who'd read Immanuel Kant, a student who'd brought fresh fruit to class, ended her life with a single gunshot to the head, sitting in her home at her kitchen table. She left no note, no explanation. No one can make any sense of it. Her professors lean heavily against the classroom walls and cannot speak. We realize too late that we never taught our students what ducks know without knowing they know. That we must love life before loving its meaning. We must love life, and some meaning may grow from that love. But if love of life disappears, no meaning can ever console us. in the thoughts of this contemporary teacher.
The writings we receive from our Jewish heritage in the Hebrew Scriptures includes the writings of an anonymous philosopher who takes on the persona of King Solomon from the 10th century before the Common Era. These are two excerpts from the middle of his writing found in the book of Ecclesiastes. There is something in life that doesn't make any sense to me. There are those who are good, upright people who are treated badly. And there are mean and selfish people who are rewarded in this life as though their deeds were honorable. So I commend enjoyment. For there's nothing better for us to do than to eat and drink and enjoy ourselves all the rest of our days. Go, eat your bread with enjoyment. Drink your wine with a merry heart. Let your garments always be white. And do not let the oil be lacking on your bread. Enjoy life with the ones you love, all the days that are given to you under the sun, because that is your portion in life. Whatever your hand finds to do, do it with your might. And again I saw that under the sun the race is not to the swift, nor the battle to the strong, nor bread to the wise, nor riches to the intelligent, nor favor to the skillful. But time and chance happen to us all. In this story from the ancient teacher, may we find wisdom for our living.
This is a poem by Ellen Bass. She entitled it, "The Thing Is." The thing is to love life, to love it even when you have no stomach for it, And everything you've held dear crumbles like burnt paper in your hands, and your throat is filled with the silt of it. When grief sits with you, its tropical heat thickening the air, heavy as water, more fit for gills than lungs. When grief weights you like your own flesh, only more of it, an obesity of grief. You think, how can a body withstand this? Then you hold life like a face between your palms. A plain face, no charming smile, no violet eyes, and you say, yes, I will take you. I will love you again. In the story from this poet, we all know how hard it is to let go. To let go of a lifetime of stuff that we've accumulated. To let go of control, or at least the illusion of it. To let go of hurt. To let go of painful and debilitating memories. To let go of the way things used to be. To let go of our expectations of ourselves and of each other. We all know how hard it is to let go. But sometimes it's really hard to hold on. It's hard to hold on to hope when we fear it might just be denial. It's hard to hold on to love when we fear it just might break our hearts again. It's hard to hold on to honesty in a sea of lies. It's hard to hold on to compassion in an ocean of selfishness. It's hard to hold on to forgiveness in a culture of getting even. And it's really hard to hold on to peace when turbulence is our primary experience. So I don't know about you, but I truly get that disillusioned, anonymous philosopher whose voice cries from the wilderness in the middle of the Hebrew Scriptures. That voice of ancient Israel. And perhaps it was by pretending that he was King Solomon, Israel's second favorite king of all time, son of David, the most beloved king of all time. Perhaps it was by impersonating the king that he managed to have his voice preserved in the tradition so we still hear it. There was a time in my life, really early in my vocation, when that ancient voice resonated more with me than any other voice in the Bible. I OD'd my congregation on Ecclesiastes. And when they weren't hearing Ecclesiastes, they were hearing Job. And when they weren't hearing Job, they were hearing the Psalms of Lament. How long and how much longer? My God, why have you forsaken me? Deep calls to deep. That was the steady diet, and they stayed with me. In a time in my life when the tectonic plates of my world were colliding and the ground beneath me felt like dust, I didn't gravitate to a Jesus who loved his friends and enemies. I was drawn to the despair of a teacher who had concluded that everything he'd been told, everything he had been taught just didn't hold water. And I was compelled by the honesty of his search. It's kind of ironic that he passed his writings off as Solomon, that great iconic king of ancient Israel's heyday, because he was actually a critic of that dominant narrative. He was a great critic of the prevailing wisdom of his day. He was the minority voice, always taking on the party line of his tradition. The prevailing wisdom of his day was, you get what you deserve, and you deserve what you get. Good is rewarded, and evil is punished. The good guys always win in the end. The bad guys always get what's coming to them eventually because God is in his heaven and all is well with the world. The only problem for the writer of Ecclesiastes was that he found absolutely no evidence to support that dominant narrative. And he felt betrayed. Betrayed by his leaders and by his teachers and by his tradition. Maybe he even felt betrayed by life. Because without a script for justice in the end, there's no sense of meaning in the middle. And so we hear the voice of his despair again and again because he keeps trying to hold life like a face between his palms and love it. And his writing is this great tug of war between a rant and a refrain. The rant keeps despairing about the meaninglessness of it all, because there'll be no great reckoning, he figures. There won't be that twist in the plot that resolves all the tensions in a tidy ending. And so this refrain that he keeps coming back to and offering again and again is the best he can do. Charles read it for us. It comes twice in chapters 8 and 9. To eat with gladness, drink with joy, enjoy your life with those you love, and do what you can do. And whatever you find to do, do it with all your might. I keep thinking that if he had lived by the ocean instead of in the desert, he would have had algae and sea plants to teach him about holdfasts. He would have had the wisdom of other species to inform his search for meaning. I wished he'd had a grandfather who could have taught him to listen to the prayers of trees and rocks and grass and sky. I wish he'd received a song like Scott Kern's to help him keep holding on. I wish he could have received the wisdom of the natural world to support his search for meaning in the middle of his paradigm shift. Amid his grief and his loss, when the world was turned upside down or right side up, I wished he'd had the companionship of those other voices we've heard this morning. And then maybe he would have known he was onto something in those brief refrains that keep punctuating his lament. Those refrains about eating and drinking and being merry, of finding joy in the pain and pleasure of life, not just as a response to fatalism. It's not just about eking out what joy we can from the ride because we're all doomed to crash. It's like Kathleen Dean Moore said, it's about knowing what ducks know without knowing. That we have to love life before we will find love in its meaning. And that if we love life, some meaning will grow from that love. And if our love of life disappears, there is no meaning that can console us. Our deep struggle for meaning asks us to let go of illusions and delusions, to let go of hurts and slights, to let go of grudges and grievances, to let go of our anger and our hate. But it also asks us to hold on, to love life even when we have no stomach for it, to hold life like a face between our palms and say, yes, I will take you and I will love you again. To keep falling in love with life for as long as there is life to love. And when we forget, there's always a rock, or a tree, or a cloud, or a blob of kelp, or a voice at the other end of the phone, or a smile from a stranger, or a song of a bird, or the sound of laughter to remind us that even when we feel like there is nothing to hold on to, we are held fast by our connection to all that is. We're tethered to life, to a long and deep life. And so we'll discover that life is amazing and it's awful and then it's amazing again. And in between the amazing and the awful, it's ordinary and mundane and routine. So what can we do but breathe in the amazing? Hold on through the awful. Relax and exhale during the ordinary. That's just living, heartbreaking, soul-healing, amazing, awful, ordinary life. And it's breathtakingly beautiful. As a way of placing our prayers with one another today, I want to just offer an opportunity for us to either name out loud to one another or to name to ourselves in silence that which helps us hold on, to consider where it is that we find capacity to hold fast through the storms of our lives. What is it that anchors us, that holds us, that keeps us buoyant? And if you'd like to name that out loud for us, we invite you to do that. If you want to name it in the silence of your own being, I invite you to do just that.
My family has the full cycle of life, as my ex-father-in-law passed away July 2nd and my father passed away July 13th. And so there's losses. And my daughter-in-law Jade is 13 weeks pregnant and due with my first grandchild in January. So everything is as it should be.
What holds me fast is this congregation, all it is and does, and all the people, and the long history in my family of its connection to churches.
Music. Mountains. Sunsets. Love. Music. From that place where all things pray, we pray. Sometimes we pray with sighs and silences, with a dropped jaw. Sometimes we pray with words we struggle to find or words that come easily to mind. And I invite us to offer this prayer with one another as a way of speaking our intentions in the hope that by this time we have shared with each other through the wisdom we've heard, through the wisdom we offer one another, we will live in that place of letting go and holding on. We pray with one another. We pause in gratitude for the moments of discovery in our lives, the honesty of deep connection, the release of tears, the easing of fears, the renewing of wonder, the delight of pieces making a whole, the gift of new beginnings. We pause to honor the moments of disorientation in our lives, where we feel lost in our grief, stalled in a search for something we can't quite name, lost in our worries, distant from ourselves and each other. In life's great dance of letting go and holding on, may we open to the path before us. May it be so. I want to thank you for all the ways that you support our life and work with one another. Those of you that give your time to things like food bank, making tax time pay, refugee committee support, to those of you who give your time to the tasks that are invisible to our life together and utterly essential, for the gift of making music, playing an instrument, offering your voice, giving your time to caring for our grounds, to making coffee, to stacking and unstacking chairs, to all those ways that we enable the gathering of this spiritual community and its work and witness in the world. We also thank you for the ways you support us financially by your contributions to our donation box at the back of this room, for your contributions online at our website, for those of you that contribute each month by pre-authorized remittances that come from your bank accounts, and those of you that support our grocery card program by purchasing your groceries, by purchasing gift cards for various grocers here each Sunday morning. We thank you for all the ways that you make this spiritual community possible. As we take our leave of one another, we take the light of our wisdom, the long wisdom of our tradition, the wisdom of storytellers, of poets, professors, writers of children's literature, songwriters, and the wisdom deep within us. We take it with us, that come what may, we may be true.